Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the upcoming Indian elections, of course the anti-Muslim sentiment that we've seen and of the campaign that is being led by Modi, its ramifications overall as far as India, within India and of course also in the region. We'll be talking about the inflammatory rhetoric we've seen come from the Modi campaign, of course the accusations that are being levelled which are of course being used to stir anti-Muslim sentiment. We'll be talking about that, its own effect as far as India itself is concerned, its treatment of its minorities, its effect on those minorities, of course Muslims, but other minorities also. Overall, the extremist sentiment which is being built up and used in the campaign also, and discrimination, representation, which seems to be on the agenda. All of that today on Perspective. A little later on, we'll also be talking about the Rafah situation, Israeli attacks in Gaza and Rafah, and of course its effects that we've seen, the killings, the brutality that is happening in Gaza, and of course the Rafah situation also. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have with us Aizaz Chaudhry, who's a former ambassador. Thank you for being with us. Aizaz Saab, can you hear me? Can you please unmute?
Oh, okay.
Yes,
am
now,
I muted?
Gee, now I can hear you. Aizaz Saab, we've been, as far as this campaign is concerned, this Modi led campaign in India is concerned. Of course, we know the interference that we've seen, as far as India into other territories, that of course we've seen happen not only in Pakistan but Canada also, to an extent we've seen in the US also. There is now, as far as this build-up is concerned, internally within India, what is happening, built up of this extremism, anti-Muslim sentiment. How do you look at things there and what are its effects in your opinion?
Well, at the heart of Modi's election campaign seems to be the Hindu nationalism that he wants to use to create a Hindu state. And that somehow appeals to majority of Hindus, and even the opposition is not willing to criticize him for that.
Okay.
Ordinarily, no one should have this objection to creating a Hindu state. After all, in India, Hindus are in majority and therefore they are entitled to create a Hindu state. The difference is that when that state is being created at the expense of minorities, by demonizing one segment of population which is not Hindu, which is Muslim or Christians, that's where the problem starts to occur, because Muslims are in quite sizable numbers there, and this whole campaign to to create this perception that Muslims are somehow out to create difficulties for the Hindus is simply not understandable, because they are just barely 14.5%. And on top of it, he also brings in his election rhetoric the name of Pakistan, and thus there is now a real fear that Hindu violence against the Muslims could increase. So that's the one aspect of it. The second
I'm going to interject. As far as this play is, this kind of projection, like you're saying, or this Hindutva philosophy projection, as far as Modi is concerned, isn't it going to build resentment in the minorities, and how much of it do you think is responsible for, as far as if we look back for the success of Modi's earlier campaigns? Do you think that this is going to play a sizable amount of it's going to help him, and to what extent, in your opinion?
I think he has overplayed that hand, because in the first three phases, the turnout was lower than BJP's expectation. And therefore, the anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-Muslim rhetoric was ratcheted up. And so he has used them, the rhetoric, to show them that they are infiltrators, ghusbetiyas, they are outsiders, and they are within their right to undo the mosque and in place raise temples. So all kinds of things are being said, and it will certainly create difficulties for minorities. By the way, it is not just Muslims, but Christians are also a target, mainly because the Hindutva philosophy, as chalked out by Savarkar and Golwalkar, it says that anyone who lives in India has to be a Hindu. And if he is not a Hindu, then he has to adopt a Hindu way of life. And those whose fatherland and holy land are not in India, they are certainly not welcome to live here. So it's the Christians also who are bearing the brunt of this hate speech that's going on. And I think that given the size of these minorities, and to add to that is the Dalit, the low caste Hindus, there could be a serious commotion within Indian society. And that's why the saner Indian voices are trying to strike sense into BJP's leadership. But at the moment, they are riding a very rough horse, and they don't seem to be listening to any sane voice and moving full speed ahead with the Hindutva philosophy.
Aizaz, even, as far as India's image is concerned, we know that, there is, to an extent, the cultural, we see culture also being used, we see art being used to promote a certain image in the world as far as India is concerned. Do you think it's taking a significant amount of beating internationally also? Because now, to an extent, you can camouflage the reality, but it is certainly not possible to do so 100%. And India now, some of the policies, of course, are permeating all over the world. And it is, to an extent, we see the world acknowledging that it is not what it's trying to show the world. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it is. Take, for example, what happened in Canada or the US, and also last year, 20 killings by Indian intelligence operatives inside Pakistan. All this shows a very different face of India now being exposed to the world. And you are right, they have used culture and the icons of their culture for propagating an image. But in the end, they are now being diverted to propagating the core beliefs of Hindutva. There's a book I often quote by Kunal Purohit, H-Pop, which is Hindutva pop, and he shows how that culture is being used to propagate Hindutva, which many, by the way, Indians don't share, because it is against the founding philosophy of modern India, which was based on secularism and pluralism. And therefore, within India, there is considerable anxiety. But as I said, Pakistanis should not have any objection to creation of Hindu state, except for the attitude towards Muslims and Christians and Pakistan, which is highly very objectionable. And India must not, and this leadership must not tread that path.
But in terms of what's happened, it's economic growth, infrastructure development, all of those things. Those are normally used in campaigns. This anti-Pakistan sentiment also, which is a part of the anti-Muslim or anti-minorities campaign, the extremism, the way that it is being used, as far as you yourself said that he's overplayed his hand in that regard. As far as, for example, we've seen as far as Congress is concerned, the policies within Congress are concerned. How would you compare? You think that overall there is, by and large agreement that perhaps, within all political parties that this is the right path, or there is some thinking, that perhaps this is too much, or it's taking India towards the towards the wrong side?
Oh, absolutely. I think the regional parties, the parties in west of India, the parties in south of India, they do not really share that agenda. Even Congress would not share that agenda. So it's not the mainstream voice. And I agree with you. There were quite a few developmental accomplishments that could have been highlighted. After all, India is now a fifth largest economy. It has the BJP government has constructed 50,000 kilometers of national highways, the landing on the moon, etc., etc. There's quite a few that they should have been actually used rather than the hatred and hate mongering that was actually carried out. The other trend that is increasingly worrying the Indian audience, and I'm not talking about us, is the tendencies of fascism within India. And books are now being written. There is a book, The Incarceration, by Al Pasha. She promotes she produces evidence to show that state machinery is being used to incarcerate people who have different voices. So this dissent is now a sort of guilt in there. And that again is a matter for the people of India to decide. Will they want to live this kind of departure from the rational way of life and move towards extremism or not? That's up for them to decide. But this is a matter of grave concern. And I've seen articles in The Economist, in New York Times and elsewhere where concerns are being expressed about the fascist tendencies that are creeping in slowly with the Modi government.
We talk about, Aizaz, I want to, as far as Kashmir is concerned, as far as the demographic engineering there, we've seen, as far as, they do demonstrate a pattern. And do you think that India is in danger of that permeating within India also?
Well, India has used force to occupy and maintain its occupation of the Jammu and Kashmir territory, which the people of Kashmir have never accepted India's occupation. So resistance has always been there until a point came when Modi thought that we should just simply abolish the state and absorb them into India. And that's where that shows that the problem continues to exist, because the wishes of the people of Kashmir have not been respected. And that's a major blot on India's conscience. India should have allowed long time ago the people of Kashmir to exercise their self-determination. They haven't done that.
But that policy, that pro-Hindutva expansionist agenda that we are looking at as far as India is concerned, do you think that, that concept that raises concerns, there are, of course, we've seen that people raising, like you said also, different voices, saner voices raising concerns about violating territorial integrity of neighboring countries within India also. Do you think that when will the world, I mean, like you said, of course, there's a certain reality as far as economic clout of India is concerned. One can't doubt that. But do you think that we will see a sterner action, or we will see, some kind of a perhaps a more parallel reaction come from the rest of the world because of this interference?
I'm not too sure about that, honestly, because I have seen that the world, the Western governments, for example, haven't spoken a word about the situation in Gaza. Although their people are raising voices, but these governments continue to support Israel. Similarly, on the plight of the Kashmiris, which government has stood out? They don't. I think they work on the real polity, which means that India is a bigger country, has a bigger economy. We need to deal with it, and we need to engage with them. That's why India's excesses have been sort of overlooked. But if the change has to happen, I think it will come from within India, in my view, because this policy that is being based on hatred is not likely to be sustainable, in my view.
What about when we talk about these G5 meetings, we talk about, these countries coming together. You don't think that these are concerns that will be raised there, for example, on those platforms?
They are. I think they are already talking about the high-handedness of India in apprehending its opponents on foreign soils. And US has even filed a case in its legal system, and same is the case with Canada. And I think Pakistan also should, because we have clear evidence, at least in the case of Shahid Latif and Mohammad Riaz that they killed last year. We should prepare legal documents, file a case in our courts, make a letter rogatory and present it to the world and elsewhere, so that they can see for themselves what India is doing to international community. So that real face of Indian government, I think, needs to be exposed.
I know that you're short of time, but overall, in terms of the option, as far as, legally taking this up, the ICJ also, consent is an issue there. So you think that it's really a viable option to go down that route?
Yeah, in ICJ, I see that problem. Because every time, and I think Pakistan gone there to ICJ for 3 or 4 times. Every time we went there, the jurisdiction became an issue. Because the ICJ charter requires that both states must be ready to accept the jurisdiction of ICJ for that matter. And India has always invoked I think there was some clause that allows it to not proceed for the Commonwealth cases. So that route I think is not workable. But we know that the international community has spoken on this matter against India on many issues, on many forums, including in the United Nations. There are long-standing United Nations Security Council resolutions, but India is just not caring about them. It's just like Israel is not caring about the binding UN resolutions under Chapter 7 on creating a Palestinian state. And same, India is also doing exactly the same. And unfortunately, behind both these states, Israel and US and India, is the United States of America. United States of America.
So the only country, like you are saying, that can make a difference in both these situations, where we're only looking at, the kind of policies that are coming forward as far as Modi is concerned, aggression that is happening as far as Israel is concerned, is US. And the US is not willing to look beyond the economic clout or, the kind of clout that India offers. And that change,
Yeah, the United States, for the United States, India is their best bet to counter the rise of China. You see, the main priority for the US is at this time competition with China. And that's where they see India in this light. And that's why they think that India has a role to play in their Indo-Pacific strategy, in the quadrilateral coordination dialogue called Quad. And for Israel, they want to see Israel as an instrument of their policy in the Middle East. So you are right, absolutely right. I think it is the United States which is the most preponderant power backing both these powers, and we can see the result. India wants to act as a net security provider in this region, and Israel wants to do the same in Middle East, and both are being backed by the United States. And all three don't care for what the UN resolutions stand for.
Right. Thank you so much, Aizaz Sahab. Thank you for being with us. It was an absolute pleasure. Before moving on, we've seen the kind of policies as far as India is concerned. We've also seen the kind of them permeating into other countries like Canada, like the US also. Pakistan, of course, has always been a case in point. We have dossiers, we have Kulbhushan Yadav as a case in point. The question is, when will the world see it for what's happening from India? When will the world see India as the hostile neighbor that it is, and the interference that it poses, the threat that it poses, the belligerence that we are looking at, not only for Pakistan but other countries also? We'll be talking more about this, and I have with me Brigadier Waqar Khan. Brigadier Sahab, can you hear me? Brigadier Sahab, can you hear me?
हाँ, ये आवाज आ रही है
जी। Ji, Brigadier Sir, we are, we've been talking to Aizaz sir, we were talking about what's happening as far as India is concerned, Modi's campaign, his, one-point agenda, which seems to be against Muslims and all minorities, and its effect as far as the region itself is concerned. Secular India seems to have been exposed. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it has been since last 10 years. If you count from Moody's first tenure, there was an agenda by the RSS, and they are gradually moving to that. And by 2023, 24, there was a plan that they'll declare India as basically Hindutva Republic and maybe amend the constitution. And now they are very close. I don't know what are going to be the results because Indian election is a very long process. Spread over almost 6 weeks, and I think in first week of June we are going to get the results. But the indicators are that they are going to, I think, sweep through the Hindu belt or the cow belt, especially central and northern India, and maybe they'll have some tough time in the south and in the northeast as well as northwest. By and large, they are claiming that they'll be getting closer to plus of 400 also. But let's see what are the results because the Indian election can be very tricky. The India Alliance, which is composed of secular parties, basically is trying to contest. But the way Modi has built up on anti-Muslim, anti-minorities, anti-Pakistan narrative, and at times they have been, a very, very frivolous type of comments. For instance, he's now saying that probably, Pakistan is going to sell the nuclear weapons because they don't have bread to eat. Then he also mentioned that Congress is going to take your gold, and they were very, very funny remarks. There's a social media activist, Mr. Dhruv Rathi, and if you look at his blog, so they're actually being criticized all over the world. Even I think Al Jazeera had a program that secular India is probably dying, and there's a pushback. But let's see what are the results. But Modi now all focused on Hindutva agenda.
As far as this agenda is concerned, as far as, do you think it's we saw what happened in Kashmir, and we've seen the demographic engineering there. It was certainly done with a plan in mind. Do you think he has a certain plan for the kind of India that he's clearly trying to make at this time, as far as with this extremism, anti-Muslim sentiment, anti-minority sentiment? Is it seems to, is it wrong to say that it's perhaps moving towards a kind of cleansing or ethnic cleansing, or the kind of violence that he's trying to create there?
Yeah, I think BJP and RSS already thrived on anti-Muslim hate vote. If you look at the laws amended right from occupied Kashmir, then you had CAA, NRC, all Muslim targeting. And even then in this election, I think this was the first time, because in last two elections, he did not come directly against Muslims because mostly it was led to the second or third tier. But this time he has been very, very vocal, naming and shaming Muslims and trying to link Congress with Muslim vote and all that. He even talked of vote jihad, from love jihad now. And I feel if you look at the Nazi agenda, 1930s, if you look at Nuremberg laws, the way Nazis, developed hatred against one particular community of the Jews, same is being replicated in India, and this has been happening for last, I think now, more than 10 years. And gradually they are going. Unfortunately, the pushback which was supposed to come from liberal and left India or the international community has not been, seen. And despite there was criticism in the media, but publicly the West has not condemned him. Despite knowing, same is true for inside. Now even Congress has to, basically follow the soft Hindutva agenda. They also agree with certain initiatives taken by the RSS. So it means there is a pushback. And if you look at the bureaucracy, the military, the judiciary, and look at the decisions on Ram Mandir and Ayodhya, look at the decision on occupied Kashmir. So it appears that now everything is, and people say even election commission is in the grip of RSS and BJP. So there is no challenger as such. And I feel it will be a sorry state that India is pushed into Hindutva Republic. And then you start, but India probably cannot afford. Maybe Modi desires it. But if you look at the demographics, Muslims form almost 250 million people. And then you have Dalits, again, 220 million. You add Shudras. So almost 77% of, you can say disenfranchised class against 23% of the upper class, which basically Modi pushes. So it's going to be very, very dangerous for India, because if you look at Muslim demographics, in certain areas, they have very large concentration, like Western Uttar Pradesh, Kerala, you have occupied Kashmir. Then even some of the cities, even in Haryana, Muslim majority, West Bengal, Assam, then comes to Bihar. So it can't be simply because you can't push 250 million people. So in case Modi moves forward, I think they're going to be very serious situation for India and the neighboring countries, because then the fallout is going to come to neighboring countries.
Brigadier Sir, I want to move on to talk about the situation, the unfortunate situation as far as Palestine. We see in Gaza, Rafah, and the humanitarian crisis that we are looking at there. Sadly, we've been talking about this for a while, but nothing seems to have been changing for the people that continue to die, the brutality there, the women and children overall. As far as the situation is concerned, of course, we see forcibly displaced people all around. We see the people that escalating, the Israeli strikes escalating. In your opinion, where is the situation headed at this time?
Yeah, I think it was continuation of the Aiva policy that we discussed right from Ben Gurion's time, but it was not of that level that now they have achieved. If you look at the ordnance delivered, I think we discussed in December also, it was equal to 2 nuclear weapons of Hiroshima size, and now people say it's 3 nuclear weapons or 3 atomic bombs. And if you look at the push being militarily, they are being pushed from north, the main Gaza, to central Khan Yunis area, now to Rafah crossing. So gradually there's ethnic cleansing, and then even some of the ministers said that we'll turn Gaza into a car park. And somehow international community publicly not been able to, I would say, push back Israel. Had the OIC taken a strong stance, I think, and boycotted Israel, or put some sanctions, things could have been better. But unfortunately, because of, I think, interest. But now, if you look at the battle of narratives, even within the West, in the universities, in USA, I think Israel and the people who support Israel in the West are badly exposed. Their governments are badly exposed. And we find that Israel has lost the war of narrative. But unfortunately, if you look at the loss of lives, including the injured, I think it's crossed 100,000. Because if you add the injured, I think 70% are injured. And now we're talking of closer to 35,000, almost 50% children and women. So this is, I think, a very unfortunate something which is being live telecasted on the TV channels. And somehow the international conscience, I would say, is sleeping. I think UN, OIC, international community could have taken, much stronger action to stop Israel. But unfortunately, it has not happened.
Brigadier Sahab, we are also, as we keep on talking about the US, and, we were earlier also talking about this with Aizaz Sahab, the situation in Gaza and Rafah, and the only country that really has the ability to make a difference there is the US. And yet, the kind of action that we want to come from the US is not coming. We see a kind of, perhaps, I don't know if you agree, is there a change at all? Do you think that perhaps there is, they have, there's some thawing there? Do you think that, would you agree with that, Brigadier Sahab?
Somehow, I think the Jewish lobby, especially the Zionist lobby in US, when it comes to elections, when it comes to bankrolling the politicians, congressmen, senators, is very, very strong. If you look at ex-President Trump, he still, feels very strongly. If you look at Biden, also has not been able to do much. The only thing I think they did was that recently, as they started attacking Rafah, there was some stoppage of some ammunition. But nothing more than that. Every time they come up with an argument, Israel has the right, for self-defense, and somehow Israel then has a blanket, cover. So publicly, if you look at, government to government, US could have done, a lot. But somehow they are so much strangulated by the Zionists or the Jewish lobby within US that becomes very. And this is an election year in November. I think they're going to be presidential election. So probably the president. But now there is another factor which has come as the liberal and the Muslim vote within US. Because look at the protests in universities. So these elections are also going to be, I think, very, very interesting. How does the Muslim community vote and how the liberal and the left votes, because they have seen and they have protested against Israeli atrocities. But somehow, if you come to, Capitol Hill or White House, I think they are, I would say, powerless, in front of the Jewish and Zionist lobby. And that has been an unfortunate, chapter in President US, I would say, dispensation. If you look at the way they have violated, they have vetoed UN Security Council resolutions or for the statehood of Palestine. There was recently, I think, one passed by the UN General Assembly. But somehow the lobby is very, very strong. Until that changes, I think the status quo will be there.
Brigadier Sahab, I'm going to include Faraz Ali Khan, who's a senior analyst, and then I'll come back to you. Faraz Sahab, can you hear me?
Ji, Mahrukh, I can hear you.
Faraz Sahab, we were hearing what Brigadier Sahab was saying, and he said that, there is, of course, we'll see how the Muslim, lobby and the Muslim general sentiment, of course, we've seen. That is against what's happening in Gaza. That is against the brutality there. And overall, we've seen the protests happen in Washington. We've seen the protests happen all over the world, in Europe also, London also. As far as America is concerned, how they vote, it's interesting, he said, and which way they vote. But also, within even those that are not Muslims necessarily, don't you think that the outcry is huge within the US also, or you think that perhaps it's been, it's just those that, perhaps Muslims or those that sympathize more with what's happening?
Well, Mahrukh, I think it's not just Gaza over there in US. The problem is Biden wasn't able to create an impression, a lasting impression that was expected of him when Donald Trump had to go. So Trump has become a very, very, he's become a very hard opponent over there to beat for the Biden. It's not just Gaza; it's just adding to it. The policy, the state policy with the Gaza and Israel is just adding to it. But when we talk about, in general, the American people, they're not very happy with the Trump administration. So yes, you can say the Muslim and the anti-Israel vote has been different over there. But as far as we talk about Biden, Biden has not been able to impress the people. It would be difficult for him to win.
Include Natheer Moeed, who's an expert on Middle East, and then I'll come back to you. Mr. Moeed, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Mr. Moeed, we're talking about this, with this, the effect, of course, I want to talk, I guess, focus on the US and the reaction that should come from there, because it seems to be the only country that can really make a difference to what's happening to the people. The death of children and women, it's I don't know how any human being can watch what's happening. And I'm sure you agree with that. Do you think that there's going to be some change in the policy there? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think that U.S. for decades it's been supporting Israel blindly, and it's the time for change now. The American people, the students in the universities, they are changing the situation. They are putting a lot of pressure on the political system in America. So the American politicians need to choose between their people and the Zionist lobby in America, which is also putting pressure on the American politicians. So they need to choose between both. Are they going to defend human rights as they always say, or they are going to continue what they've been doing for decades?
But in terms of choosing, in terms of the election that's also coming up, in terms of within the US, and like you said, the kind of protests, the university students, so you think that you would say that there is a change in the mood overall?
No doubt. There is a lot of change. The war on Gaza have changed not only America, it changed the world. There is a lot of change inside America. Everyone is taking care of this sensitive issue now. It was totally 100% neglected issue in America internally. And the American government used to 100% support Israel, as I have already said. But now it's not the same situation. Now they are talking about cutting off some military support or weapon deals or different support to Israel because Israel have committed crimes and have committed as the American government see it, unsatisfying standards.
As far as the mood, like you're saying, perhaps there is a change there. In terms of what's happening as far as the Middle East, other countries, as far as the Muslim countries are concerned, as far as the European countries are concerned, where do you think they stand at this time?
Well, the whole world is different now. The war on Gaza have changed the world. A lot of Muslim countries are putting pressure. The European countries, especially, there is a lot of movements, lot of protests, and a lot of even politicians. They are changing their thinking, how they are reacting towards the Middle East, towards the Muslims issues in different areas of the world. They are changing how to see the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and now they are even reviewing the history they have studied. They have read the different view, our view, the Muslims' view on history. They are changing. The Europeans and the Americans are changing. We hope that the Muslims could react properly. They are still, their reaction is very weak, not up to the expectation of the Palestinians, not up to the expectations of the victims in Gaza. So we need more activities, more pressure on the world society.
We have seen, we talk about the international response like you are saying. Let me go back to Faraz on this. Faraz, can you hear me?
Hear you?
Faraz, there is, as far as the role of media is concerned, we have for a time seen that, earlier on we saw what happened. We saw there was this, one can say there was an attempt to sort of, mute what the real situation was as far as the main media was concerned. But then there's this social media and the kind of flooding in the social media of the real pictures, the real state of affairs at this time has sort of changed that tide. And do you think that as far as media is concerned, it's played a significant role in trying in the kind of awareness that now permeates all over the world as to what is actually happening, and what was there was an attempt to camouflage that, one has to say, by Israel?
Well, Mahrukh, media has no doubt, there's no doubt about it that media has played its role, and it has played its role beyond normal. Media has been the biggest collateral damage. You see, there have been good dozens of media personalities being killed over there. You talk about Al Jazeera has been the biggest loser in this thing. They have lost their star Middle East reporters. And recently, Israel's government has passed a bill to ban Al Jazeera from reporting from there. They have expelled them. So as far as media is concerned, media is the only thing that has brought it up and kept it alive. But Mahrukh, let me just add one point to the U.S. Elections over there we were talking about. I think, Mahrukh, it won't change if Biden is there or Trump is there. The policy on Middle East and the way U.S. state supports Israel, it will stay there. It won't change any difference. It won't make any difference. No matter whoever is there, we've seen Obama over there, we've seen Trump, we've seen Bush administration. As a matter of fact, the Middle East policy never changes. Israel is still going to be there. They're going to support them as a matter of state policy. That is what is alarming. If you talk about the common American people and how they're going to vote in this upcoming election, keeping Israel in point of view, so remember that. The silent voters.
Right, fair enough. Brigadier Saab, do you agree with what Faraz is saying, that by and large, of course, the US policy is dictated by, larger concerns to what suits them, their relationship with Israel, and it doesn't really matter what happens in the elections as far as the Israel situation is concerned?
Yeah, I think it is even displayed. If you look at how Biden has handled it, so it's been, despite, some, I would say, a pep talk to Israel, nothing concrete. And if you look at Trump's statements, he's even, has a very harder stance. If you look at President Trump, ex-president, so it means I think I'll agree with him, irrespective of. But the only I think difference has been I think on two fronts. One is in the West, especially internally, the highlighting of Palestinian issue, especially the way students have responded in the civil society, and then is also I think media. If you look at initial dominance or the earlier dominance by the Jewish or the Zionist lobby, they had almost 90% control of international media. But now you find, like Al Jazeera, it was mentioned, I think they have been the best fighters to bring out the Palestinian, miseries and atrocities again. And then comes the TRT, like Turkish and even RT, and then, of course, a couple of other. Unfortunately, the Indian media toward the line of the Western media. By and large, the Western bloc media, big houses like CNN, BBC somehow, or Le Monde of France, or
very true. Thank you so much. We've, of course, the situation at this time remains largely the same as far as Israel, Rafah, and the situation in Gaza is concerned. The kind of onslaught that we are looking at from Israel seems to be ceaseless. We thank you so much for joining us, Aizaz Ahmed Chaudhry Saab. Thank you for your time. Brigadier Retired Waqar Khan, thank you for joining us. Natheer Moeed, thank you for being with us today. Faraz Ali Khan, thank you for joining us. One hopes that there will be a change, but the fact that the expose that we've seen as far as what's happening, the real situation that continues to be shown, regardless of the attempted camouflage that we saw earlier, is itself a very, very little change. But we are looking at the world, watching the reality of what's happening to women, children, to people, the displacement, the torture, the deaths, the brutality that is at play. And one continues to pray that there will be a change very soon. Thank you so much for joining us today on Thursday.